Welcome back to Beelzebub the Jug. It's time to apply the red rot treatment to these fabulous bespoke Peel and Co gillies that do have red rot around the edge. And if we take a tissue and if I rub the skin, you can see very clearly it flakes off. It's just like a dusty powder. It shouldn't do that. I did actually treat this little tiny area as a test piece last night, and it hasn't changed the colour. And I'm hoping it's still a bit dusty. It'll need a second treatment. And I did treat the inside there, and that hasn't changed colour at all. And that was never dusty, but it's just leather, it's just skin, and it doesn't appear to be affected. But it's so close to the areas that are, I just can't take the risk. So I will be putting a bit around the edges of the lining where I'm worried about it. But anyway, let me get my trusty towels over my legs. I did make a detailed video, demonstrating, discussing, this solution, how to prepare it, how to mix it, what it does, how it works, etc. I'm not going to be discussing that today because it is quite it's a lengthy video, and I explain exactly what the chemical solution is that's needed. Now, take the trees out. These have already been cleaned with alcohol because I was not sure that the trees themselves didn't have some sort of mold or fungus. Okay, so I'm literally just going to, let me just pull my fabric of my sleeves out of the way as well. I'm literally just going to paint it on. I've got a couple of paintbrushes. Let's have a look. That one might be the better one. It's a bit hard. I've used that for something else, perhaps not. Let's use this one. Okay, so I'm literally just going to cover the whole skin with this solution. I won't do the whole thing on camera because it's pretty tedious to watch. But just to give you a sense and get right down into the little brogue areas, you just sort of patiently stir about. Now, the cellulose that's dissolved in the alcohol is being drawn into the skin. The alcohol is being absorbed into the skin, and it's taking with it the cellulose solution. Actually, it was as powder. It was a cellulose powder, and the evaporation will take place. The alcohol will disappear, and it leaves behind the cellulose, which kind of rebinds and reforms in the structure of the skin itself and stabilizes the skin very successfully. And there we go. Hopefully, the skin then returns to its complete natural color. There's no evidence of what's been done here. So there's one area. Let's just move up to another area that we know has been heavily affected. It'll probably take me the best part of an hour to go over the whole shoes, and I don't really want to do all that on camera. It would just be too long, too boring. It's got to be treated, but there's no real need for me to be doing that amount of treatment on camera. It's a repetitive process, and there's no hidden tricks. I won't do anything off camera that I'm not doing here. As you can see, it's a slow and tedious process. And but once it's been treated, this flaky, dusty skin will be nice and stable. It preserves what we've got. This is a preservative, not a restoration. It stops the situation dead. It doesn't allow it to get any worse. But if there is already damage to the skin, that will still be evident. So this treatment doesn't restore the original appearance of the skin. It preserves what we've got. book conservators use this particular product. It's called Klucel G. And but yeah, in my previous videos, I discussed the Klucel G and show you how to mix it. But as you can see, this is going to take time. It will take at least an hour for me to just carefully go through. And I'm not scrubbing at this because the skin surface is delicate, it's fragile. And once this has been treated, I might have to treat it a second time. What I'll do, I'll wait for this to dry, then I'll come back to the skin with the tissue and wipe it with the tissue again. And if we get any red powder on the tissue, it's still flaking, I'll give it a second treatment. If not, we're spared that. But I do suspect it will need a second treatment. Just probably not quite as slow and as methodical as this one. I'll be able to, because the skin surface won't be as fragile. I'll be able to paint it on a bit quicker. Once it's already had one treatment, it will be largely stabilized. That's it really. And of course I'll do exactly the same on the edges of the lining. I don't really want to do all of the lining, but I'll certainly do the edges up here where we know it's been in contact. And that looks a bit fragile at the back. So yeah, that's it really. Ooh, that side's pretty much dried already. It's been just less than 10 minutes. I painted that on quite heavy and it's dried. So we can see the colours returning to normal. And no, they're just beautiful, beautiful things. And they deserve to be treated properly. And once I've got the skin stabilised, I can then sort of deal with the fragile and failed stitching. But you can't be fiddling with skin that's as fragile as these. And these ridiculous heels and sole stick-on things need to come off. But I don't really want to be manhandling the shoes whilst we know that the skins are quite fragile. So let's just put a little tiny bit more on here. But yeah, this will be the last little bit I'll do on camera here. I'll just continue this process extensively off camera, both shoes, and then I'll bring them back to camera at in a few days, I would imagine. We'll have a look at them and see how the process has taken place, and if indeed the skin looks untreated. We don't want it to look treated, that's the thing. We need to conserve the original appearance, and I'm pretty confident that that's the case. So this solution has to be mixed by hand. It doesn't come ready mixed. It's difficult to transport as a liquid. It's alcohol based, and it's quite unusual to buy it ready mixed. So it comes as a powder. You have to mix it. You have to mix it by hand. It takes a couple of days to be able to get the product to dissolve in the alcohol, and then it can be too thick. And if it's too thick, it sort of sits blobby on the surface. If it's too much alcohol, not enough powder, it's not a concentrated enough solution. It goes in to the skin and doesn't leave any residue behind, but there's just not, when the alcohol evaporates, there's not enough cellulose within the skin for it to bind properly. So I'm pretty sure that's about right. It's sort of thickish, but I've tested it and tried it on different items, tested it last night on this, and I'm pretty sure we're okay. It's got to the stage where it's very, very difficult to, there's a little tiny blob of the cellulose. That's been there for 3 days now, just a little clump. I've tried to break it up and get it to absorb into the alcohol. It won't. I think the solution's so saturated that it can't physically take on any more, but it's still fluid and it still sinks in and it doesn't leave any sticky residue behind. So I'm quite confident that I've got that solution correct. It's as strong a concentration as it possibly could be without it being too thick. But, I could put more powder in there, but it wouldn't dissolve properly and it would thicken up. To be kind of grainy and gritty, and it would definitely get too thick and it would leave an awful mess behind on the on the skin surface. So it does take a little bit of just a little bit of trial and error. Each batch that you mix up is different, so you've got to sort of, you can't just pour it together and say that's fine. You do have to test each batch. Anyway, I'm going to stop because these videos get very long, but we've had enough time for that area to dry, Well, it's not quite dry, but we can see it's returning to its natural state. And that's starting to go as well, you know, because it goes on wet, but it is an alcohol and it evaporates quite quickly, unlike water. And I must stress, if you have some of this and it is too thick, you can't dilute it with water. It has to be diluted with alcohol. If you do it with water, it just goes milky, and it causes the cellulose to go into lumps. It's horrible. You'll have to throw the solution away. It's diluted with alcohol only. I did speak to somebody that had made that mistake. He'd had some of this. Oh, it's a little bit thick. I'll pop a bit of water in it. It'll be fine. But of course it wasn't. Anyway, let me stop gossiping, and I'm going to leave these. I can't continue with this as it happens. I'm just about to start work, but I wanted to get this video made before we open for business, and then I'll just get this finished off camera, and I'll bring them back to camera when they've been completely treated, both shoes. But now we get a good sense of exactly what this is going to look like. You know, it'll look untreated, right? You've just watched me do that bit, and it doesn't look any different. There's no difference to the colour. The main thing is when it's fully treated, if I wipe it with a tissue, instead of getting white red powder on the tissue should come away clean. That's what we're really hoping for, and we'll come back to that stage in a week or so.